Hello and welcome to the channel. On today's tutorial I'll be making an off-shoulder dress with a structured sleeve. So for this tutorial I'll be drafting directly on my fabric. I'll go ahead and I'll place my tape at -4 because it's an off-shoulder. We are minusing the upper part. After that, I'm going to mark the shoulder to bust of the person I'm working with and the shoulder to under bust. Then I'm going to mark the person's half length. Note, I'm not working with the waistline. So to get your half length is your shoulder to under bust plus 3. So the person's shoulder to under bust is 12 plus 3. I have 15 inches. So I'll just cut out the area that I'm working with. After cutting the part I'm working with, the next thing I'm going to do is to place my tape and mark my nipple to nipple. That's my bust span divided by 2. So in this case, as I'm drafting directly on my fabric, I'm going to be adding half to it. So I'm going to mark my nipple to nipple measurements divided by 2 plus half, which is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5 and I'm going to add half to it. So I'll go ahead and I'll extend all my vertical lines and outline it. So at my under bust line, I'll be marking a dart intake of 1 inch at both sides. So after marking it, I'm going to extend it to the down part of my fabric. I'll still mark that 1 inch for the dart intake and I'll extend my lines. Coming over to my bust line, I'm going to place my tape and I will mark half inch. The reason why I'm marking this half inch is to avoid a sharp edge when I'm joining or drawing the curve at that point. After doing that, I'll go ahead and I'll place my tape on top and I'll be marking 1 inch dart intake. So this is also for the bust tightening at the top of my pattern of fabric. After marking that, I'll go ahead and I will connect my lines. So I'll just do that gently. I'll connect from the upper part to that half inch I marked and I'm going to blend it back to the 1 inch dart at the down part. After doing that, I'll go ahead and I'll join the darts on the other side also. After connecting the lines, I'll go ahead and I'll cut out what I have drafted already before we are going to put or place our body circumference. So please ignore the line at that other edge. After cutting out my pattern, this is what I have. So I'm going to place this other part on this with half inch. So make sure it's lapping with half inch. So after that, I'll go ahead and I will pin the material together. Now we are going to take our body circumference and all the necessary measurement. So I'll place my tape and I'll mark the nipple to nipple measurement, the bust span I'm working with, and I'll add half inch at that point just for turn up purpose or sewing allowance to the upper part. Next, I'll place my tape at -4 and I'm going to get the chest line I'm working with. So to get your chest line is your bust divided by 6 plus 1.5, and I'll connect from that half inch I marked on top and I'm going to create a box for my chest line or armhole curve and also draw my armhole curve. Next, I'm going to place my tape at the chest line and I'm going to mark the bust circumference I'm working with divided by 4 and I'll be adding 2.5 inches allowance. After marking it, I'll also go down and I will do the same at my bust line, but I'll make sure it's still overlapping each other with half inch, and I'll go ahead and I'll place the bust circumference divided by 4 plus 2.5 inches. So if you don't want to repeat the same process, you can just go ahead and measure what you marked at your chest line and you're going to transfer the measurement back. At the under bust, I placed my tape and also made sure it was still aligning, and I placed my tape. I marked the under bust circumference divided by 4, and I marked 2.5 inches allowance. Then the measurement I had at my under bust, I extended it down to the top length. I'll go ahead and I'll cut out what I have drafted already. After cutting out my armhole, I'm just going to place my tape at 4, and I'm going to go down by 1 inch, and I'll connect it back to that side. So I'll blend in the armhole, which means I'll be cutting out some part of the armhole because the front part of this dress is almost like a tube. So I'll be cutting out some part of the armhole. So after outlining, I'm just going to cut off my pattern. After I'm done cutting, this is what I have. So right now we are going to the back pattern of the dress for the upper part. I'll cut out the required amount I need for my back. First, I'm going to place my tape and I'm going to mark my zipper allowance. So I'll do that from the beginning of the fabric to the end of the fabric. After marking my zipper allowance, I'm going to place my tape and I'm going to mark my vertical measurement, and I'll go ahead and still place my tape at that -4, and I'll mark the bust point and the under bust point that I'm working with. After inserting my vertical measurement, the next thing I'm going to do is to insert my horizontal measurement or my body circumference. At my bust, I'm going to mark my bust divided by 4, and I'll be adding 2.5 inches allowance to the pattern. So after marking at my bust, I'm going to mark at my under bust. So at my under bust, I'm going to mark my under bust circumference divided by 4, and I'm going to add 2.5 inches allowance. Note, all the measurements that I've been taking started at the zipper point or at the zipper part, that part I marked for my zipper. So that's where I'm taking all my measurements from. After that, I'll go ahead and I will connect the lines there. Then after connecting the lines, the next thing I'm going to do is to mark the nipple to nipple or bust span I'm working with divided by 2. So for my dart intake. So after marking it, I'm going to mark 1/2 inch at the down part. So this 1/2 inch I'm marking is for my dart intake. So you can also cut out your dart and join, or you can just sew a dart on it directly. So I won't be cutting out this pattern. So I'll go ahead and I will connect the lines, drawing a dart. Before marking my dart, I'm going to place my tape at -4, and I'm going to mark my chest line, which is 7. The chest line I'm working with, which is 7 inches. After that, I'll go ahead and I will draw my dart at both sides. I'll mark 1/2 inch and I'm going to connect it for my dart intake. Next, I'm going to bring my front pattern and I will place it at my back pattern. The reason why I'm doing this is for the armhole at the front and the armhole at the back to align. After I make sure the armhole area aligns, I'm going to take that line down. So that will be the starting point for my back, because the back is just straight and the gown is like a tube gown with a structured sleeve on top. After doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to cut off my pattern, and with this our back pattern is ready and we're going to cut for the skirt part. I'll place the back pattern for you to see what it looks like, and then I'll go ahead and I'll place the front pattern that I cut earlier. After placing all my patterns, this is what I have for the front and the back parts. Then I'm going to sew my dart intake while sewing. So moving over to the back down part of the dress, which is the skirt part. So for my skirt pattern, I'm going to be using here as my starting point. So I'll place my tape and I'll mark 10 inches for my hip line. The reason why I'm using 10 inches is because I didn't make use of my waist length. I made use of my half length, which is 2 or 3 inches above your navel or waistline. So after that, I'll go ahead and I will mark my skirt length. So I'll place my tape at that 15.5 that we stopped earlier for the upper pattern, and I will mark my skirt length. After marking my skirt length, I will go ahead and I will add 2 inches for folding or turn up allowance. Now moving over to the upper part of the skirt, I'm going to place my tape and I'll place the waist circumference I'm working with divided by 4, and I'm going to be adding the allowance I'm using for this particular dress. So you can make use of 2 inches or 2.5 inches allowance. It depends on what you're working with. Then after that, I'm going to place at my hip point and I'm going to mark my hip divided by 4. After marking my hip circumference, I'm going to be adding my allowance, which keeps me here. Then at the lower part of my skirt, so whatever I have at my hip point, I'm going to be minusing 2 inches from that. So the reason why I'm doing this is to have that fitted look at the lower part of my skirt. So afterwards, I'll go ahead and I'll connect my lines, marking out my skirt pattern. Then I'm going to take my scissors and I will cut off my pattern for the front. Going for the back pattern, I'll place my pattern and I'll add 2 inches in front for my zipper allowance. So after doing that, this is what I have. Like I said, I placed my front pattern on a fabric and I cut out and I added 2 inches for zipper allowance. So I'll go ahead and notch that upper part to indicate the upper part of the skirt. So this is the fabric that I cut out for my structured sleeve. So you can use the same fabric or you can use another fabric for your sleeve, just like in the picture. So I have a total of 24 inches by 11.5. So you can use more than that depending on what you want or what you're working on presently. So my sleeve is not that big. I just want a moderate sleeve. So I'll keep that aside and I'll go over to the down part of my skirt. So at this point, I'll be marking the part for my lining. So for my skirt pattern, I'm going to be removing 2.5 inches for my lining part. The reason why I'm doing this is just to give it that turn up effect at the lower part of the skirt. Remember, we added 2 inches allowance for turn up. So by the time you're done removing 2.5 inches allowance from your lining and after sewing, you're going to have that turn up effect at the back of your skirt. So at the side, I'm just going to sew by half or turn it up by half, and I'm also going to repeat sew for my skirt for the back part of my skirt. Coming over to the upper part of my pattern, I'm going to place my pattern on my lining and I'm going to cut out exactly, and I'll be joining it with 1/2 inch. So afterwards, I'll be cutting my wording for it. So if you're making use of an already made cup, at this point you'll be attaching it. So this is my skirt. I've gone ahead and I attached it with 1/2 inch with the lining. Next, I will flip my lining this way towards the fabric and I'm going to measure out 1.5. Remember, we added 2 inches for turn up allowance. So if you add 1.5 to that 1/2 inch we sewed earlier, we'll be having 2 inches allowance. So after measuring it, I'm just going to sew with 1/2 inch from this point to the end and round the skirt. Then I'm going to flip open my skirt and I'll show you what I have after doing this. So you're also going to do this to the back part of your skirt also. I'm done turning my skirt, and this is the turn up effect I was showing you earlier. So this is what I have, and I also did that for my back pattern, sorry, my back dress. So what I'm going to do is measure 10 inches from the top, and I will sew downwards. So I'll keep this aside, and I'm going to bring my sleeve. So for my sleeve, I cut out the same measurement for my lining. So my lining, I'll be ironing gum stay to my lining. After ironing gum stay to my lining, I'm going to be sewing boning to the lining to give it structure. So depending on what you want to work with, you can also make use of your collar stay or peplum stay. So if you make use of that, you won't be adding a boning to this. So I'm going to sew my boning half inch away from the beginning of the fabric. So I'm going to sew it at both sides. After sewing it, I'll go ahead and I'll join the lining to the main fabric, and I'm going to turn it up. And while sewing your boning, you're going to leave about 1 inch or half inch at the end. Enable you attach it to the dress. So while doing this, it's best to use a reddening boning because it might be easier for you to handle. But if you want to use a plastic boning, it's also okay. Going ahead to the front part of my dress, I'm going to join the upper part to the lower part. So before I join, I'm going to fold and find the middle, and I'll also do that for the upper part. I'll fold it into two, and I'm going to find the middle, and I'm going to notch. After notching, I'm going to join the part that I notched together, and I will sew it from that part. So the reason why you're doing this is just to make sure you get the middle of both patterns of fabric. After joining both my back pattern and my front pattern, and I attached my sleeve, next is I'm going to be shaping my dress. I will place my tape at my under bust, and I'll mark my under bust point. After getting my under bust point, I'm just going to take my tape up and I'll mark my bust point. After marking my under bust point, I'm going to go down to my navel point, and I'll mark. Then after marking my navel, I'm going to mark 7 inches down to get my hip point. Next step is to insert the body circumference that I'm working with. So to shape the bustier part of your gown, you're going to measure your bust circumference divided by 2. After doing that, you're going to measure the center point where you joined at the bustier. So whatever you get there, you'll be minusing from your bust. So the circumference of the bust I'm working with is 33 divided by 2. I have 16.5. So measuring what I have at the center where it's joined, I have 6.8. So what you do next is 16.5 minus 6.8 inches. So whatever you have as your answer, you go ahead and you divide it by 2. After dividing it by 2, you mark at each side. So assuming your answer is 10, you're going to divide your answer by 2, which is 5, and you're going to mark it at both sides. So after doing that for my bust area, I'll go ahead and I will also do it for my under bust area. At the under bust, I'm going to divide my the under bust circumference I'm working with 2. After dividing it, I'm going to measure what I have at the center where they joined the bustier at the center. Whatever I get there, I'll be minusing it from the circumference I divided by 2, and whatever I have, I'm going to divide it by 2, and I will share it at both sides. At the lower part of my gown, at the navel, I'll be dividing the navel circumference by 2, and I'm going to place the measurement at that point. After doing that, I'll go down to the hip area, and I'm going to measure the hip circumference divided by 2, and I'm going to mark what I have. At the lower part, I'm going to be measuring 1.5 inch at both sides. Normally you're going to be minusing 2 inches, but I minused 1.5 so that it will be a bit free at the lower part of the dress. So this is the dress after I'm done shaping it. So this is what the back looks like. It is actually a tube gown, and I'm going to be attaching the sleeve next. So what you're going to do is, at this point, you're going to be top stitching. So another way to attach your sleeve is also to attach it at your zipper area. So this is actually easier. You're just going to place what you have and you're going to fold in and you top stitch at that point. So you'll be doing that at both sides of the back, and you're just going to pleat little just to give a design, or you can just join it straight. After joining it, this is what I have, and this is what the back looks like after you're done joining. So next, I cut out these pieces and I turned it up. So the measurement is 3 inches by 4. So I'll go ahead and I will show you an illustration of how I'll be attaching this to the sleeve parts. So what I'm going to do is I'll find the center of this dress and I'm going to sew with a pinch or half at the upper part, and I'll also be working with my pin. I'll pin it down at this point this way. So after pinning it, the next thing I'm going to do is just to fold my dress a bit, the sleeve a bit, and I'm going to encase it inside this fabric that I cut out for the center. After folding it inwards, I'm going to top stitch at this point and I'll be having this effect. So I'll just pin so that I'll show you what it looks like. Folding it and sewing. So I'll go over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew. But before I sew, I'll just unpin what I did and then I will sew and then fold back just like I illustrated in the video. I'm done sewing and this is my final look. If you find this video interesting and educative, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and also drop your comments. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you for always viewing my channel, and turn on your notification button to get new updates from my channel. Thank you.